No Omen Pass. The cards look really fun. Let's get into it. One thing that I really like about deck building in Modern is there's no clear best card advantage engine. You have a lot of different powerful options to choose from, and some fit different deck ideas better than others. And I think Loki, God of Mischief, can join the cast of good card advantage engines in Modern. It's a 2 mana 2/1. Whenever a player or permanent becomes the target of an ability, not a spell, an ability you control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So it's my job as Aspiring Spike to look at standard sets and say, hey, this card's really good with Mishra's Bauble. And it is really good with Mishra's Bauble. The ability to go Bauble, play Loki, crack Bauble, draw a card, and turn Loki into minimum a 2-for-1. If your opponent has a removal spell, you've already drawn a card. That dynamic is really important. Also very good with Solitude, your ability to play this, evoke Solitude, exile something, recoup the card disadvantage from Solitude, and then try to translate this into like a cascading card advantage engine is good. Could draw cards off like Teferi Time Raveler, Field of Ruin, Rin 6 is another card that comes to mind. And we have had success with Relic of Progenitus and Ketramos in the past. This was, pre-Quantum Riddler, but there was a time where the Relic of Progenitus tapping every turn to trigger Ketramos was like a pretty real plan for your card advantage engine in Modern. And Loki's very similar. In fact, if you get two relics in play, you can tap one on your turn, one on your opponent's turn, and just draw two cards on a turn cycle, which I think is a really big deal that Loki can draw two cards on a turn cycle, isn't actually restricted to just one. And I will say, if you're drawing a bunch of cards, it's always better to do it in a blue deck than a black deck. Like black decks, you can a lot of times draw a lot of cards with Ketramos, but you're drawing discard spells, can't discard the top of their deck. Your opponents can top deck big stuff like Ugin and just totally sweep the board. But if you're a blue deck and you're drawing a handful of counter spells, this is like it's just always a better plan. Maybe kind of simple, but we could definitely see this game plan just working out better with Loki in a big way because Loki is a blue card and Ketramos is a black-white card. Also, being 2 mana instead of 3 mana is a really really big deal. And the fact that Loki is 2 mana, it's hard for it to be super clunky, right? You're going to be able to deploy your Loki. You're going to start drawing cards with it. If it dies because it's legendary, you're drawing cards. You're kind of likely to be digging for a second one. And it's kind of hard for you to feel like you have too many copies of it, because if you have one in play, you're just drawing a lot of action, and you're happy to have a backup. Where Ketramos being 3 mana, just a little bit clunkier. Also, Ketramos loses you life, and that's sometimes pretty awkward on your card advantage engines if you can't get it online. So I'm pretty optimistic for Loki. We'll definitely be building some decks with it, and I expect that it'll be a pretty good option. Will it be the best card advantage engine in Modern? I think the answer is almost definitely no, but I think that's kind of a good thing. I think it's good that you just have a lot of choices when you're building blue decks in Modern. Armor Wars reads super flashy. It's a 4 mana saga, blue and a red and 2. So that when it enters, you may draw a card for each artifact you control, and if you do, each opponent draws a card. It does have a little downside, but we are living in a weapons manufacturing Pinnacle Emissary world. Very realistic that you're going to play this and draw like 8 cards. Maybe as soon as turn 2 if you have like a really nutty Mox Opal Springleaf Drum hand. And you might be looking at a 4 mana saga and saying, a 4 mana saga in Modern? What are you talking about? But Legend of Roku is currently a Modern staple. It's a card that people are playing in the main deck of Boros Synergy and winning challenges. I think we need to entertain a card like Armor Wars in kind of as an affinity version of Legend of Roku. Chapter 2 says artifact spells. You cast this turn cost 1 less, so you get to draw a lot of cards. You get to play those artifacts cheaper. This ability is not that relevant in Affinity because a lot of your stuff costs 0, but if you are playing like a 4 Springleaf Drum build to facilitate casting your 4 mana saga more consistently, I could see that being relevant to reduce like your Urza Saga 2 to target, Springleaf Drum, etc. And then Chapter 3 says it deals X damage to target opponent, where X is the greatest mana value amongst artifacts you control. So ideally, if you have a Kappa Cannoneer, maybe a Thought Monitor for 6 or 7 damage, that would be great. Pinnacle Emissary could deal 3 damage. For the most part, you're playing this as a big card advantage engine. The other modes are just gravy. I think that if I'm going to be testing this in Affinity, I'm probably not going to start off playing the 4 copies in the main deck. I think you're really likely going to want to play less than that, because it's so punishing to draw 2 copies of this early, and you just don't have an Affinity hand that can like snowball, because in Affinity you need to be like playing your little stuff into your big stuff. It's possible that this card ends up being like a sideboard card, and you play this, you draw a bunch of cards, and then if your opponent Wraths Skies or Meltdowns, it doesn't matter because you just like have a brand new hand to redeploy. So I think this card looks great. I'm really excited for it. I hope Affinity players are too. Looks like a lot of fun. The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl is a 4 mana 4/4. Whenever it enters or attacks, you make a 1/1 squirrel token, and you can spend 4 mana to make another token for each squirrel you control. So the squirrels get out of control. And if you've been keeping track of the decks I've been building and playing in tournaments lately, I've been playing a lot of like fair green piles with Fanatic of Ronus, Green Sun Zenith, Badger Cub, Aurora Boroid, Slumbering Trudge. And I think the Squirrel Girl fits really well into a lot of these shells. Although I do think it's going to be mostly as a one of Green Sun Zenith 2 to target. Although we'll see. Being legendary means you probably don't want to play too many copies. But you might be looking at a 4 mana green creature and being like, how is this a modern card? What are you talking about? And I am definitely someone who underestimated another 4 mana green creature very recently, Aurora Boroid. This is a card that I totally dismissed as a modern playable card. It took me months to try it, and then I started trying it. I was winning a lot with it, and I have top 8 multiple challenges with the card. I think it is really, really good. And I think that there's a lot of situations where I would want to tutor for Squirrel Girl over Aurora Boroid, mostly in situations where I'm wanting to like kind of build a bigger board, but also in like situations where I have like an untapped Fanatic of Ronus up, like being able to play this, make a token, tap Fanatic, make 2 more tokens, untap, attack with Squirrel Girl, make another token, double again. It seems like this is just a way to build a gigantic board really, really quickly in these green decks. There's also some combos that that go with Squirrel Girl, mostly involving Enduring Vitality. So this is a 3 mana 3/3 that says creatures you control have the ability to tap for 1 mana of any color. I've been kind of interested in playing this before, like Enduring Vitality with Badger Cub and Corian Ranger. Like it seems like this could be just like a good mana engine by itself, and it's something I haven't quite ever pulled the trigger on. But all of a sudden, if your squirrels can tap for mana, and you have this new card, Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, you can activate those mana abilities immediately. Shang-Chi is a new 2 mana 2/2, says you may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. You can also tap 2 mana to activate abilities. Not the most relevant for most of the ways I'm going to build this card, but kind of like a tutorable Tyvar effect is really good with the Squirrel Girl combo. Because all of a sudden your squirrels all tap for mana, you're going to tap them, you're going to make more squirrels, and then you just have infinite mana, infinite power, and toughness, which is pretty easy to win games of Magic the Gathering with. And if you're playing one of these mana dork creature combo decks, which I've been playing a lot of, these decks really play a lot of Green Sun Zenith, they play Summoner's Pack, sometimes Court of Calling, and just having these 3 1-ofs become relatively easy to assemble and can be individually powerful on their own. Like Shang-Chi is just going to be good on a lot of your other mana dork turns, and Enduring Vitality is going to be really good on your Badger Cub, Corian Ranger draws, and Squirrel Girl will be really good kind of on empty boards, and also really good with Aurora Boroid. You just make a lot of creatures, and then you make them really big. I'm excited to play with these cards together. I think it's going to be interesting. I really like these archetypes, and I think Squirrel Girl fits really well. I've been building decks in Modern for a long time, and I've tried to break Shape Anew so many times. It's kind of like a Tinker. It's a 4 mana sorcery that says the controller of target artifact sacrifices it, but instead of searching your deck for an artifact and putting it into play, you reveal cards until you hit one, and the first one you hit goes into play. So the way to break this card is to put an artifact token into play. The best way to do this is Gingerbread Cabin, so your deck's full of just green fetches and Gingerbread Cabins. You can fetch it, turn 4, Shape Anew, and then whatever big artifacts in your deck, you can just put that into play. We've tried this with a lot of artifacts. We've had some success with cards like Instone, but the 10 rings is the new best way to do this. The new best way to do this by a lot. It says your maximum hand size is 10, and at the beginning of your end step, if you have fewer than 10 cards in your hand, you draw cards equal to the difference. This card is really, really strong. I'm interested in building a control deck that's built around Shape Anewing into this as quickly as possible, and then having a hand full of cards like Solitude, Subtlety, Force of Negation, maybe even Commandeer. Just a lot of free pitch spells. So you can just play it, interact with your opponent, and then draw back up to 10 cards next turn. Really excited for this. I'm optimistic that it's going to work. It's also notable this card pitches to Ugin's Labyrinth. I have had a few builds of Shape Anew that play multiple different things. They can hit off Shape Anew, and you play Ugin's Labyrinth and use cards like Tomio and Deduce to put an artifact token into play, and then you Shape Anew those out. I think Gingerbread Cabin is usually better, but anytime a card imprints to Ugin's Labyrinth, it's pretty notable. I think Hex Magic is a really big upgrade to Ruby Storm, although it's possible it ends up being like a little win more. It's a 3 mana sorcery. It's also an arcane spell, which is so random, but it is really relevant in Ruby Storm because you can splice onto arcane. How that works is, say you're going to cast an arcane spell, in this instance Hex Magic, and you have a Desperate Ritual in your hand. You can spend an extra 2 mana and you can add Desperate Ritual's effects to the effect of the other arcane spell. So if you have a Ruby Medallion in play for 4 mana, you can play Hex Magic and you can get 3 mana back. What Hex Magic says, it's a 3 mana sorcery. You exile all the cards from your hand, and then you draw that many cards. And until the end of your next turn, you can play cards exiled this way. So this card, technically, it's like a wheel, right? You're going to discard your hand, draw that many, but you're going to go -1 card in your hand. If you had 4 cards in your hand and one of them was Hex Magic, then you're going to draw 3. But then the other 3 cards that you had in your hand, you can play those this turn. So potentially, if that's the case, this Hex Magic is a draw 3. If you have 6 cards in your hand, it's a it's a draw 5. And like this is potentially very, very powerful, right? If you're getting this like 3 to 5 range. If you're casting this and you only have 1 or 2 other cards, all of a sudden it's becoming like a Reckless Impulse or a Rin's Resolve. If this is a card you're top decking, it's useless. And it's making this card like really hard to evaluate for me, where it is kind of inherently like a win more card where you need to have more resources for you to utilize this. Also, if you like Rin's Resolve or you Reckless Impulse into Hex Magic and your hand is empty, it doesn't really do very much. So I'm having kind of a hard time evaluating it, but the power is like undeniably there. In some situations, it's just going to draw you so many cards. And so maybe this is something you're playing as a 1 or 2 of it, Ruby Storm. I would probably just go ahead and just main deck 4 and see how it plays and be kind of optimistic that it'll be a good upgrade. Maybe it somehow is a 1 of Wish target. I kind of doubt that. Usually when you cast Wish, you've like used all your other cards in hand, but I think some really, really high upside for this, and it also only goes in Ruby Storm. I have a really hard time imagining in Modern it goes in any other deck. Okay, let's talk about Moonmist. I have been dying to talk about Moonmist for a couple of years now. Moonmist is not a card from the new Marvel set. This is a random common from Innistrad. 2 mana green instant, transform all humans. It also prevents all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures that are not wolves or werewolves. So why are we talking about Moonmist? Well, in these Universes Beyond sets, characters are mostly humans, right? You know, we as authors write about other humans. Those humans inevitably become magic cards. Whatever you're writing eventually will become a magic card. A lot of these cards from Final Fantasy, Avatar The Last Airbender, the most recent Spider-Man set, and now Marvel, they have humans that transform into big monsters, right? And so in theory, you can use Moonmist not exactly how it was intended to transform humans into werewolves, but to transfer universe beyond legendary creatures into giant things. In Final Fantasy, in Avatar The Last Airbender, and in the new Spider-Man set, there weren't really any humans I thought were that exciting to flip. I think the closest was probably Avatar Aang, but for the most part, even though there were cheap humans with high mana value cards in the backside, there wasn't anything I was that excited for. In this set, there are 4 that I think are kind of interesting to talk about, and it's possible that we're going to play them all together in kind of the same strategy. So let's talk about them. I think the most promising is Bruce Banner / The Incredible Hulk. Bruce Banner is a 1 mana 1/1 and has a 6 mana backside that is a 8/8 reach trample and has this ability Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, you put a counter on him, and if he's attacking, you untap him, and there's an additional combat phase after this phase. That's really powerful. If you can go, let's say, turn 1 Bruce Banner, turn 2 Moonmist, then when you untap the next turn, if you can like bolt your Hulk, you're attacking for 18, attack for 9, attack for 9 again. And you might be like, wait, what happened on turn 2 when we Moonmisted Bruce Banner into the Incredible Hulk? Well, the problem with Moonmist, and I'm pulling my hair out about this, is Moonmist fogs your own creatures. So when you Moonmist Bruce Banner into Hulk, it prevents the damage the Hulk is dealing, which is one of the biggest flavor fails that I've ever maybe seen. I don't know. That being said, is it still good to transform Bruce Banner into the Incredible Hulk on turn 2? It's gonna be in a lot of situations, especially if your deck has some red damage in it. Maybe you have Ren and 6 or something to be able to deal damage to your own Hulk and get the extra combat phase. It does seem pretty powerful. Is it powerful enough to build an entire modern deck around? I don't know, but there are 3 other options. And of course, if you're transforming more than one thing at a time, your Moon Mist becomes more powerful. Oh, I also want to say Bruce Banner can just draw X cards every turn, and so like that is kind of nice. You know, if you have nothing to do turn 2, you can draw a card. If you top deck it, you can draw a bunch of cards. Like it's not particularly good, but I like for my combo pieces just be able to draw a lot of extra cards. Probably not too many other playable fight cards in Modern, but this one is a land on the backside and a fight spell on the front side. So I could see playing some of this cards in the deck, assuming the mana works to like trigger both of your Hulk abilities. And I think that, I'm kind of interested in maybe playing like a Bant build with both of these. And then there's another possible Bant transformable creature. There's King T'Challa, and on the backside, Black Panther, Hope Enduring. Maybe King T'Challa has the best front side of all of these cards, but it's also the most expensive. Being 3 mana instead of 1 or 2 is kind of bad. But it's a 3 mana 3/2 flash. Flash is good. Whenever a player draws their second card in turn, you can draw an extra card. And the backside is pretty powerful. 3/3 double strike, prevent all damage that would be dealt to it, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And then with double strike, you get to draw 2 cards when you deal damage. Very annoying still. If I Moon Mist T'Challa, I can't draw cards a turn I play it. And this is maybe going to be the problem. Like if Moon Mist didn't have the fog ability here, I'd be like super excited about this possible Moon Mist deck with these 3 cards. Am I still going to build it and try it? I think yes. Am I going to play all 3 of these? I'm not really sure. Actually, building this deck is going to be kind of tough, especially because drawing Moon Mist is not going to be the easiest thing to consistently do. You only have 4 copies. Maybe you need to be playing preordains. It's going to be a very difficult deck to build. It's possible it just turns into Bruce Banner Moon Mist is like this kind of 2-card combo you're playing, since I do think it's a good bit stronger than the other 2 options. But if you can get that extra mana value, right? And then that's what we're trying to get, right? We're trying to get the 6 mana value of She-Hulk by only spending 2 mana up front, and the 6 mana value on Incredible Hulk by only spending 1 mana up front. And same thing here, 6 mana value for only spending 3 up front. If you can get extra flip value, that does improve the power of Moon Mist. So I'm going to try it. I think it'll be a lot of fun if it's not very good. There is one more possible Moon Mist target. It actually doesn't get got as bad by the prevent all damage clause, although it still does get got. Tony Stark. Tony Stark's kind of hard to evaluate overall because it does actually have a pretty dang good front half. It's a 2 mana 1/3. You can tap it to look at the top 4 cards of your library and put an artifact into your hand from among them. And so like this is something that is not too bad in a lot of your various Mox Opal, Mox Amber packages. And then you're mostly playing this for the back half, right? The Invincible Iron Man is a 6 mana 5/5. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you can put an artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield, and if it's an equipment, you can attach it. So playing Tony Stark and then Moon Misting Tony Stark and putting a gigantic artifact into play on turn 3 is undeniably a really powerful thing to do. It's going to be very inconsistent and fragile to removal, so unlikely to be your plan A. And because you have to play a lot of big artifacts in your deck, you're probably not going to be pairing it with the other Moon Misters. That being said, it's possible with Tony Stark you don't even play Moon Mist at all. Like, it's possible you find an artifact pile, like a more slow controlling shell, that is okay using Tony Stark as a combination card advantage spell and Mox Amber enabler, that in the late game you can either just spend 6 mana to cast Iron Man, or you can transform it and kind of turn this into a bigger win condition. Now, the problem in my mind with doing that is if you're doing that, you're not going to maximize Iron Man's power because you're not really going to have big artifacts to cheat into play, right? So like you would have to be playing like a Karn the Great Creator deck somehow. Maybe somehow Bluetron can splash red to be able to play Invincible Iron Man and play this early. It seems very difficult to build a deck with this card. I'll be in my cave with a box of scraps, and these are my scraps, and I'll try. But a lot of times when a new standard set comes out, you have something that is kind of obviously powerful, like your ability to like Tony Stark flip, put something big into play with Moon Mist, or draw a bunch of cards and mox this out. It can be powerful, but just because it can be powerful doesn't mean a cohesive deck exists around it. So I'm going to try. I'll be in my cave with my box of scraps, but I don't exactly expect it to work now. Could maybe work one day in the future. Sometimes a card just gets printed the right place at the right time. Avengers Disassembled is a 3 mana red sorcery. You can choose one or both, 3 damage to each creature, or you can destroy target land and its controller searches their library for basic inputs in the land until the battlefield tapped. Um, this is coming at a time that I've been working really hard on this weird Ruby Medallion control deck with Tablet of Discovery. The general idea is you're playing Ruby Medallion and Tablet of Discovery as like big mana engines, and you're using Cleansing Wildfire, Price of Freedom, um, wish and removal spells as a way to like interact with your opponents and like blow up their stuff and blow up their lands, and then tutor for like really powerful sideboard cards like Flash Fires, Meltdown, Boil, etc. It's been pretty fun. You would not expect a deck like this to win. I didn't expect a deck like this to win, but we've had a winning record with it over a lot of leagues, and I think this card fits so perfectly as a combination sweeper land destruction spell. It's awesome. I'll probably start off main decking 3. Maybe I'll even sideboard a copy for Wish. Maybe not. But I'm really excited. Like this is like kind of a perfect fit for a deck that I really like and has been super fun to play. I'm gonna try to break Arc Reactor. We'll see. It's a 5 mana artifact. It has Improvise, which is like artifact convoke. You can, instead of paying a mana cost for Improvise, you can tap an artifact to help pay for each of the generic cost here. It enters tapped, which is not always a downside in Modern with cards like Amulet of Vigor existing. And it taps at 3 mana. That's a lot of mana. And this reminds me a lot of my Archway of Innovation Brews. This is a card that I think is potentially very powerful. It enters tapped unless you control an island. And for a blue and a tap, the next spell you cast this turn has Improvise. It's kind of like an attempt at a fix to Larian Academy, right? Where every artifact in play is giving you a mana, but you have to tap it. And so I've tried to like build around Archway of Innovation. We've tried versions like this that try to like play Karn the Great Creator, and then you grab a big thing to tutor off Karn, and then you improvise it out, or you like improvise out a big Walking Ballista. We've also tried to go bigger with stuff like Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger and Emrakul the Promised End, and that works fine too. And I think that Arc Reactor is kind of an interesting redundancy to something like Archway of Innovation, while also just kind of being a generally powerful card. I think that it's kind of interesting to maybe, if you're playing a shell like this, you could play some number of Amulet of Vigor in your main deck. Maybe you could find a way to be more in on Amulet of Vigor. Maybe you could be playing Worn Power Stone. Maybe you could be playing Timeless Lotus as other artifacts that enter tap to make a bunch of mana if you have Amulet of Vigor. The possibilities are definitely there. I think the card is really interesting, although it has like really steep deck building requirements. There is also a second 5 mana improvise spell in this set, Ironheart Clever Champion. Ironheart is a 5 mana 3/4 blue creature with improvise. It's really easy to like read this line of text. Non-creature spells you control have improvise, and forget that this is also just a 3/4 flyer, which is pretty powerful. I think that's a Somber Hoverguard, if I'm not mistaken. Well, maybe that's a 3/2. This is pretty good stats for a card that can potentially be cast for just 1 mana. And so like Archway of Innovation, it gives your other spells improvise, but only non-creature spells. So you're not able to improvise out big stuff like Walking Ballista or Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger or Emrakul the Promised End. Instead, what you could maybe do is you could improvise out Karn the Great Creator, and you could minus Karn the Great Creator and get a really good non-creature artifact to improvise out. You could improvise out something like Kozilek's Command. The possibilities seem there, and it feels like there is some deck that's combining Archway of Innovation, Ironheart, and Arc Reactor, maybe Amulet. Oh, Amulet also is like, I forgot to mention this. It's a 1 mana artifact that can tap for Improvise. I think that that's something too. It seems like there's a deck here. When it'll probably take a few different versions to find the best version, and then a little bit of time after that to see if it's actually any good. The Wondrous Wasp kind of reminds me of Flicker Wisp in some ways. Like the longer you look at it, the more powerful it gets. It's a 2 mana 2/1 flash flyer. Whenever it enters, you tap up to 1 target creature, and that creature loses all abilities for as long as the Wondrous Wasp remains on the battlefield. This is actually a weirdly very efficient removal spell on a flash creature in Modern. Like this is a card that can lock down Ocelot Pride. It's a card that can lock down Guide of Souls. You can negate Ragavan's attack ability. You can kill a construct. You can lock down a Psychic Frog. You can lock down a Primeval Titan. And I think it's really interesting. I feel like if I'm playing something like the Wondrous Wasp, I'm probably not going to want to play it in a really traditional like control deck, I'm going to want to play it in something weird, like something that has maybe Aether Vial, something that has potentially ways to flicker my creatures and, like either like lock down something different after I like block and deal with it, or potentially like make sure I keep something locked down. I think the card's just super, super interesting. It's going to be a weird card that doesn't go in a lot of shells, but the shells it goes in, I think it's going to be a standout. Okay, I guess Heroic Feast is kind of the new Heliod. When it enters, you make a food token, and whenever you gain life, you choose up to that many creatures you control. You put a counter on each of them. So this is a 2-card combo with Spike Feeder. Spike Feeder says, remove a counter, gain 2 life. This will allow you to put another counter back on Spike Feeder to repeat the loop, and then another counter on any other creature you control. So while this doesn't make your Spike Feeder infinitely big, your Spike Feeder will remain 2 power because you can't put extra counters on the Spike Feeder. You can only put, you have to spread the counters out in your Heroic Feast. This makes every other creature you control and play infinitely big. Also, you can just sack your food token to distribute 3 counters if you don't have Spike Feeder, so at least the card does something while you wait to draw your combo. Also, if you're playing Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, which you probably are, I definitely could see Heroic Feast actually being like a reasonable board presence enabler while you wait to assemble your combo. I'll definitely be playing it. Recently, we played kind of a similar combo with Leo from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Might go in that deck, might replace Leo. We'll see. I'm actually really excited about this card, Baron Zemo. I think that it's got a lot of text that I like a lot. It's a 3-mana 3/3. All black mana symbols though. So if you're going to put this card in your deck, you want to have probably almost no colorless sources. And it says whenever you cast a black spell from your hand, it connives. This can actually be a pretty powerful ability if you're playing something like the mono black Eye Twitch deck, which we've been playing lately. You can do stuff like discard your Archon of Cruelty and get to reanimate it. You can sift through your deck while you're discarding creatures to enable Crypt of Agadim. And it has another ability that's pretty interesting. Boast. It says exile any number of black cards from your graveyard with 15 or more black mana symbols among those costs. And then you can copy the exile cards and you can cast 3 of them without paying their mana costs. And so we just kind of already have a deck that's built to do this with Stitcher Supplier, Overlord of the Baelmerk, Eye Twitch to a lesser extent. You're already playing a deck that's trying to dump a ton of black cards in the graveyard, make a bunch of mana with Crypt of Agadim. And so if you're playing Baron in that deck and you're able to attack with it, you might just get to cast a couple free Archon Cruelties, or like an Archon, a Troll of Khazad-dûm, and an Overlord of the Baelmerk. Now, when you do this, you're going to take a bunch of cards out of your graveyard for Crypt of Agadim, but I definitely want to try this card in this archetype. This is an archetype that is like surprisingly good in Modern these days, and is one that I think is exciting and fun to play. And this is an exciting and fun tool for it. Could it go in other decks? The thing is, with the Boast ability, you have to attack for this to work, and so you can't really try to build around like haste enablers and getting this many black cards in your graveyard and expect it to be in any way consistent, because it ultimately does just die to a removal spell. I think this is a card that kind of has to weirdly be somewhat incidentally good. Like if you're just already doing this thing and the connive is pretty good, like I think playing a couple copies of this to play and then maybe like steal a game with, I think is totally fine. But trying to build all around Zemo is probably not going to be something you'll find a lot of success with. So I expect it to go in this shell. And then there's actually like another card that I think is really good for the shell too. Claw Sonic Subjugator. Maybe this is maybe the better of the 2 cards for the archetype. It's a 3-mana 2/2 that has Sonic Attack. When it enters, target opponent reveals a number of cards from their hand equal to 1 plus the number of creature cards in your graveyard. You choose one of them and that player discards this card. It's kind of like a Thought-Knot Seer. If you care about putting a lot of creature cards in your graveyard. And obviously this deck does, like in your Stitcher Supplier. Maybe you play Street Wraith also to like enable this a little bit more. We have played Street Wraith in this archetype in the past. More Troll of Khazad-dûm. But this is going to be a lot of times just 3 mana, look at your whole hand, and make you discard a card, which is pretty dang above rate. And it's also a black creature, which is just something you want to be playing a lot of in these Crypt of Agadim decks. I could also possibly see this as a sideboard card in Living End. Like Living End is going to be filling up your graveyard pretty quickly, and you could possibly play this against some combo decks and some control decks. Although for the most part, since Violent Outburst came back, You're not playing black based living index anymore. But I think it's a really fun tool. Maybe Claw is better than Baron for these archetypes, but I really like these archetypes, and both these cards look pretty fun too. World War Hulk is super fun. It's kind of like a new dramatic entrance. Dramatic entrance is a 5 mana instant that says put a green creature card from your hand into play, which is a card I've played in Modern before. It says five. It's a 5 mana saga. Mode number 1 is the next red or green creature spell you cast this turn can be cast without paying its mana cost. I didn't really find almost any red creatures that were that interesting. For the most part, they were all green. But let me know if there's like a red creature that I missed on my search. Chapter 2 says put 3 target counters on creature you control. So it's nice, like if you're going to go 5 mana, put Atraxa into play. Then all of a sudden your Atraxa is even bigger and stabilizes even harder. And then next turn, your Atraxa gets double power and toughness against trample. So it becomes a 10-10, a 20-20 trampler because you put 3 counters on it and it just wins the game. Not that you're going to need that much help winning the game after you put Atraxa into play. And so I do think that this card kind of is like a little bit worse Neoform if your plan is to like just cheat big things into play. But one thing that's kind of nice is it is possible for you to play something like World War Hulk in a deck that isn't like as all in as Neoform. It's possible that you're playing like a little bit of a Summoner's Pact package, and maybe you're just in Atraxa. Maybe you're playing like a Badger Mole Cub deck with Summoner's Pact, and you have like one Atraxa, and you or maybe you probably need to play more than that if you're playing Hulk, but maybe you have a little bit of a Summoner's Pact package. Maybe you pair it with something like Tarask. I do think Tarask is pretty interesting. So it's fun because Tarask has this clause. It has haste and ward 10 as long as it was cast. It's a 9 mana 10-10. So if you were to dramatic entrance Tarask, you wouldn't get this abilities because it wasn't cast. Hulk actually casts the card. So it's a 9 mana 10-10 whenever it attacks, it fights defending creature. And then it's going to go crazy also with these other modes. I think that's pretty fun. Maybe you also play something like Galta, where you can put Galta into play, and then you can put your whole hand into play, and you can kind of do this Neoform thing without being as in on Neoform. I think it's possible. I think that maybe finding World War Hulk consistently when your hand is full of these big clunkers could be a little risky. Maybe if you're in on Galta, you're doing something like putting a Disciple of Freyalise into play, the green MDFC that lets you sacrifice a creature, draw that many cards, gain that much life. I could see that. A lot of possibilities with this, and we'll definitely try a World War Hulk shell with some combination of these cards. I think it's definitely pretty fun. Better than Umezawa's Jitte, we've got Mjolnir Hammer of Thor. It's a 4 mana red equipment. When it enters, it deals 4 damage up to 1 target creature, and it doubles the damage an equipped creature would deal. And it only equips for 1 mana. However, you have to equip to a legendary non-villain card that's red or white. So something like a Felia or a Ragavan. You also have a really, really good mode on this card to discard it to deal 2 damage to each creature. Fire Magic is a card that I regularly will register in my Modern sideboards, and this has the best mode on it, Fira, to deal 2 damage to each creature at instant speed. In a world of Guide of Souls and Ocelot Pride and Ajani, this is a awesome mode to have on a card. And I definitely see myself wanting to try this card actually in mid-range Stoneforge Mystic decks. I haven't said that in a long time. We have had some Stoneforge Mystic success with stuff like Meteor Sword recently, but I think I'm going to be a red-white mid-range Stoneforge deck. I'm not going to play Umezawa's Jitte. I think the card is actually unplayable, but I kind of like the idea of like getting Stoneforge Mystic. If it dies, I can play it for 4 mana later. I can equip it to Ragavan. I can equip it to Felia. I could also blink Mjolnir with Felia and like kill creatures over the course of turns. Maybe you even play 2 Mjolnirs. Maybe it ends up being really good, and you just like very often will discard the first one and you'll play the next one. I think the card is kind of just looking like a good powerful thing that actually makes Stoneforge Mystic look like something I might want to play in Boros mid-range decks. Maybe this is like the return of Jeskai Blink. Like I could see possibly playing like Mjolnir and Cryptic Coat as my main equipment tutor targets in like a Jeskai Blink style shell. Very excited. I think the card looks, I keep saying this about the cards. Probably a good time to note. Sometimes like cards will be new and they will be powerful, but I'm not that excited because I don't think they look that fun to play with. Every card we've talked about so far actually is really fun, and I think the ability to like brew with it and have good gameplay with it exists. So good job so far. Scientist Supreme of Aim is a 2 mana Demir 2/2. You can pay 2 life to copy activated or triggered ability from an artifact source, only an artifact source, and you can choose new targets for the copy. You can only do this during your turn, and you can only do it once a turn. I've seen a lot of people go kind of crazy on this card, saying that this card is really interesting. I've seen people call this the best card in the set. I am a lot lower on it. I think this card is fragile, and the cards you have to pair with it for it to be good are also not that good. Except for Mishra's Bauble, it is good. You can go Mishra's Bauble Scientist, copy your Mishra's Bauble activated ability, and draw 2 cards with it. Like that is nice. I am interested in trying to like copy stuff like Aether Spell Bomb ability, and then maybe something like Thought Monitor, and also like I do think that one thing that's interesting to pair it with is Time Sieve. Time Sieve is a really cool artifact. It's a 2 mana artifact. You can sacrifice 5 artifacts to take a turn after this one, and so sometimes you'll pair this with Underworld Cookbook in an attempt to like flood the board with artifacts every turn and like sacrifice them to take an extra turn. And usually the way it works with Cookbook is that you're not able to make 5 every single turn, and but you can kind of build up some food tokens, and you can take like a couple turns in a row while you assemble your mana engine. And so Scientist Supreme is really cool in the shell, where obviously copying the extra turn is like that taking 2 turns in a row will let you continue to build up your food tokens. You can sack food tokens to gain life to continue to activate Scientist Supreme. When you activate Time Sieve, you copy, then you can also copy like cookbook tokens to get extra food tokens to Time Sieve again. I think that this is an interesting dynamic. If I build a deck around this card, which I probably will, it'll be likely in a Time Sieve shell. And it would be really fun if this card's good. I don't have the highest hopes for it. Maybe there's something I've missed with this card. I did try to spend like quite some time to find really powerful things to synergize it with. Nothing was like super duper exciting besides like the Time Sieve stuff. If you have a good idea for this card, I'd love to see it in the comments below. I would love to have missed something. I think it's very hard to combo with this because you can only activate it once a turn and only on your turn, but we'll see. If you got a good idea, I would love to hear it. Black Widow Super Spy is kind of an interesting take on the Ragavan archetype. It's a 2 mana 2/1 in black with Menace. Menace is huge on an effect like this. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top until they exile a non-land card. You can put a counter on Black Widow if you want, but otherwise you can cast the card and you can spend mana as if it were any type to cast the spell. So I don't think this card is better than Ragavan, although sometimes I just play decks that aren't red, and I might want to play an effect like this as in some number in my 2-drop slot. But this card has a lot of advantages over Ragavan. Menace is huge on an effect like this. The ability to grow the Black Widow if the card is not something you want to cast is pretty nice. But also, Black Widow always hits a spell. Ragavan sometimes hits lands. The fact that this always hits a spell, I think, is pretty cool. This card also can cast Eldrazi spells. It says spend mana as though if it were any type, not any color, which means Kozilek's Command, Sowing Mycospawn, Glaring Fleshraker are on the table to cast off of Black Widow, which I think is a pretty nice upside on the card. So not going to be great necessarily. It does compete with stuff like Orcish Bowmaster and Emperor of Bones as like the premier 2-drops for black decks. But I definitely can see myself playing some copies of this card in my like cheap aggressive black decks, especially the ones that are not playing red. Justice Vance Astrovic, 3 mana 2/3 flyer. Whenever it enters, you can return up to 1 non-land non-token permanent to its owner's hand, and whenever another non-land permanent you control is returned to its owner's hand, you put a counter on Justice. And this card specifically could be an upgrade to the Primal Prayers archetype. I think it's kind of a fun protection spell where if your opponent's trying to remove your stuff at instant speed, you can play Justice and bounce that thing to your hand. And it also does go infinite with Greenbelt Rampager. Rampager is kind of the main combo card with Primal Prayers. You just pay 1 energy, bounce it to your hand. And so every time you do that with Greenbelt Rampager, you get a counter on Justice, and you can have an infinite power flyer, which I think is kind of interesting. It's even possible that like this is like a big part of your deck's game plan is like just kind of value with Justice and make an infinite power flyer. Maybe not, but I think it's kind of cool and interesting, and I definitely feel like maybe as a 1 of Formidable Speaker 2 to target, it's mandatory, and it's also possible you could be more in on this effect too. Mole Man, Maloid Master, 3 mana 1/1. You can play lands from your graveyard. Whenever a land you control enters, you make a minion token that says whenever this attacks, you may mill a card. Kind of simple. I play a lot of Green Sun Zenith Ice Tail decks, and I feel like I would probably like to play one copy of Mole Man to tutor up in these strategies. Being able to make a big board of tokens with your fetch lands is always nice, kind of like the Springheart Nantuko ability of like landfall make a token. But and you know, a landfall creature who can play lands in the graveyard, pretty nice. Not too complicated, nothing too crazy with this card, but I just feel like if I'm going to be playing a deck that's really in on Green Sun Ice Tail, I'll probably have one copy of Mole Man. Ultron Artificial Malevolence, it's got my brain kind of scratched. It's a 3 mana 2/4 that says whenever another non-token artifact you control enters, you can spend 2 mana. If you do, you make a token that's a copy of it. If the token isn't a creature, it becomes a 2/2 villain creature in addition to its other types. I think there's a lot of possible new combos that can exist with this. Having your combo built around a 3 mana creature is always tough, but the card has got me really intrigued. Cathodian is a card that comes to mind to try to use with Ultron. Cathodian is a 3 mana creature. When it's put into a graveyard from play, you add 3 mana. And so if you can copy it, you spend 2 mana, you sack the copy, you get 3 mana. And so you could potentially combine it with Nim Deathmantle. And this is a 4-card combo, so I'm not exactly saying that this is going to be how we build this deck. But this says whenever a non-token creature is put in your graveyard from the battlefield, you can pay 4 to return it. So you go Cathodian, copy with Ultron, sack the copy to Grinding Station, make 3. Sack the original Cathodian to Grinding Station, mill your opponent for 3 more, add 3. That's 5 mana you've generated, and then with Nim Deathmantle, you can spend 4 mana to return it to play. And you can either mill your opponent out with Grinding Station. You are generating 1 mana every single time on this loop, and that you can win the game with infinite mana in a variety of ways. This is a 4-card combo. This is probably not going to be it. But I think some combination of these pieces, Nim Deathmantle, Grinding Station, Cathodian, seem really interesting to me with Ultron. We have played these artifact combo decks in the past with Tron, like some kind of various combo Tron shells. Usually those decks are built around Semblance Anvil or like Everflowing Chalice, Astral Cornucopia stuff, and Ultron doesn't seem to play very well with that stuff, maybe not particularly poorly either. I tried for a while to kind of mush it into those decks, and I'm kind of thinking Ultron's going to kind of need a deck on its own. So I'm going to try it. Could also be, I like that it's a combo piece that can also be somewhat of a value engine. I think that that's pretty interesting. But it's going to take some time, I think, to figure this one out. Ultron Artificial Malevolence, it's kind of got my brain scratched a little bit. Kind of like a weird combination value piece and combo engine. 3 mana 2/4. Whenever another non-token artifact you control enters, you can spend 2 mana. If you do, you make a token that's a copy of it. If the token isn't a creature, it becomes a 2/2 robot villain in addition to its other types. So we've played a bunch of like Tron artifact combo decks in this past. Those usually involve Semblance Anvil as an engine or Everflowing Chalice, Astral Cornucopia as an engine, and Ultron doesn't seem to fit very well in either of those decks because with Semblance Anvil, you just kind of want to cast everything for free, and this card requires you to spend 2 mana as part of your loops, and then Everflowing Chalice, you can't copy the counters as they enter, which I think is kind of a problem, although maybe you could play Ultron to copy like Manifold Key, but then your Manifold Key is a 2/2 token with Summoning Sickness and you can't tap it. So I think maybe Ultron will have like a new combo deck with it, although I can't find a good one. Here's one that I did find. It's a Cathodian, 3 mana 3/3 creature. When it dies, you make 3 mana. If you sack that to Grinding Station, you can mill your opponent for 3, and then you can make a token copy for spending 2 mana. You can sack that token, make 2 more, make a net 1 mana. You spend 2, sack it 3, and then when you sack the original copy, you could trigger Nim Deathmantle to spend 4 mana to return the original Cathodian to play. Triggers Ultron again, spend 2 mana, make another token. So you're spending 2 mana on Ultron, 4 mana on Nim Deathmantle, and you get a total of 6 mana from both Cathodian triggers. Not a very exciting combo. 4 cards and the card quality is not all that high. So not saying we're going to necessarily go here with it. Here's a combo that I found. I do think Cathodian, Grinding Station, Nim Deathmantle are all kind of exciting pieces to combine with Ultron. Maybe Ultron can be somewhat of a value engine where you have some like backdoor combos. Maybe you can combine it with stuff like Semblance Anvil to make stuff cheaper and then you're copying stuff. I'm open to it. I want this card to work, but at the moment I don't have a busted modern deck for you. Gonna work on it. Jessica Jones, Private Eye, I think is interesting. A 3-mana 2/3. You can tap Jessica to put a stun counter on it, and you exile the top X cards of your library, where X is Jessica's power, and you can play those cards this turn. This is a really powerful ability, especially if you can buff Jessica with any pump spells. You can like tap it and like draw 5 cards in a turn. I also think with Arena of Glory, this card becomes really interesting, where you're not playing a 3-mana 2/3 that just dies to removal spell. You're playing a 3-mana 2/3 that you can tap immediately and maybe start playing some cards. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if you want to build like totally around Jessica and like buffing it, maybe untapping it, kind of going crazy. Maybe this could just be like kind of a fine value piece. And like if you're like kind of curving out with Arena of Glory and just want to tap and play it, probably not going to be like a great piece for Boros Energy, although I'm kind of describing Boros Energy when describing this deck. I think it's just kind of interesting. Maybe is not going to be a card that makes the cut, but like a lot of like red cards in Standard, they just get better when you give them haste with Arena. Visions of Love is kind of an interesting cheap enabler. It's a 2-mana instant. You can sacrifice an artifact or discard a card, and if you do, you draw 2 cards. And there's been a couple times I've kind of combined the like Mox Opal weapons manufacturing Underworld cookbook stuff with Goryo's Vengeance. Like there's kind of an interesting overlap with Underworld cookbook and Mox Opal. And I could see playing Visions of Love in that kind of strategy where you can sacrifice a redundant Mox Opal, you can sacrifice a weapons token, you can sacrifice a food token and just draw 2, or you can use it as a discard outlet for Goryo's Vengeance. And this card is not a big deal, but it's just important that you as deck builders know that this is a unique effect. There's not another combination sack an artifact, draw 2, or a looter. And so it is now in your deck builder's toolkit, and you'll reach for it if you're somehow combining decks with Mox Opal and Goryo's Vengeance. Quicksilver Brash Blur is another really unique card that I don't think is that powerful. It's a 1-mana 1/1. If it's in your opening hand, you can begin the game with him on the battlefield. And you can also spend 5 mana to power it up. Costs 1 less if Quicksilver entered this turn. You put a counter on him, and it gets double strike. I tried really hard to kind of think about like Colossus Hammer stuff. Like you can go Quicksilver for 0, and then you can go Colossus Hammer, and then you can go there's a 1-mana red instant that attaches equipment to a creature, and you get attack for 11. And it just seems like all of this stuff is like a little too magical Christmas landy for me. Like I especially because if Quicksilver wasn't legendary, it'd be a lot more interesting. But I don't think that like pump spell Quicksilver is going to be good. Like this, like Quicksilver is not meaningfully better than Ornithopter or Midnight unless you're using Mox Amber. And if you're trying to be like really in on like a pump spell Legends deck, that's kind of inherently fragile. That being said, I do think Quicksilver is interesting as a 0-mana red creature because you can sack it to Flare of Duplication. And you could potentially do something with Infernal Plunge and Flare of Duplication. Not necessarily. Obviously you can't sacrifice one Quicksilver to both of these, but your ability to go like to be a Flare of Duplication Infernal Plunge deck is interesting, right? Because if you have 2 creatures in play, you sack 1 to plunge, you sack the other to flare, then you have 6 mana. You can maybe do something pretty powerful with that. You can maybe cast like a Chandra on turn 1 if you have like the nuts of like Mox Amber, Quicksilver, Infernal Plunge, Mountain, Flare of Duplication, Ornithopter. Probably not going to be a good modern deck, but I'm kind of presenting Quicksilver more as an enabler for Mox Amber, Infernal Plunge, Flare of Duplication. This kind of like little package of stuff. It's an enabler for these cards. I don't expect these cards to have a deck emerge out of it, but I think it's like it's an interesting piece. And I really doubt that you're going to be, unfortunately, able to do almost anything else with this card. We'll see. If you have ideas for Quicksilver, I'd love to hear it, but I kind of just don't see the vision at the time of recording. I want to like the Ruinous Wrecking Crew. I think it's very close, but I think it's probably a little underpowered. It's a black-red X. It enters with X counters on it, so it becomes a pretty good top deck. And when it enters, you choose up to X abilities. Discard a card, draw a card. Target opponent loses 2 life. Destroy target token. Or each player sacrifices a creature of their choice. So I think this card will be good if there's like a lot of Leyline Scions, and you can play like a 3-mana 3/3, make them sack your Scion, you sack like a Bowmaster token. I could see that being kind of interesting. I will say like I'm concerned about the power level with this card. It seems like a kind of a slow, like it's a slow card that you're not really playing till turn 3. So like turn 3, destroy 3 mana 3/3 destroy token is not going to be great, but maybe you can like flip their Johnny, attack their Johnny. Maybe you can kill a construct token. The edict ability is going to be like okay on a lot of boards, not that good on some other boards. The discard a card, draw a card, 3 mana 3/3 discard a card, draw a card, pretty weak. Not going to be the worst if you have Kroxa. I am kind of thinking that if you're playing Arena of Glory, maybe Arena of Glory like really powers up this card, right? So like you're like top decking it, and all of a sudden you spend like 6 mana and you're attacking 4/6 with this ability with haste. Like maybe Arena of Glory makes this card powerful enough to play in like a Rakdos mid-range deck. So I'm thinking that it's not powerful enough. I really want to like it. I think the card like reads really fun. The modes just don't quite seem strong enough, but I don't know. I might just not play with this card, but I might get the urge to play like a Rakdos Kroxa deck with it. Baxter Building, I think, is a pretty interesting land. It enters untapped, it taps for a colorless, and you can spend 4 mana to make 4 mana in any combination of colors. You can also spend 4 mana tap to draw a card. That's not the main reason why I'm interested in this, but I always like my lands being able to draw me cards. I think this card is mostly interesting with Enigma Jewel. So Enigma Jewel is an artifact that I've always been really interested in. 1 mana artifact enters tapped. You can spend 2 mana on it to activate, to spend that mana only on activated abilities. And so if you have an Enigma Jewel, you can spend 2 mana, and then you can tap 2 other lands, whatever. And this is a way for your Enigma Jewel to, like, at the very least, tap for 1 extra mana, right? Because you're spending 2 regular lands, you're spending your Jewel, you're tapping your building, and you're making 4. So it's like you're spending... basically, it's your Jewel is tapping for 1, which is not great. But if you're combining this also with, like, Sunken Citadel, Omen Hawker, all of a sudden you're getting kind of, like, an interesting, meaningful mana boost. And this ability to money launder, to filter the Enigma Jewel mana, the Omen Hawker mana into regular mana, I think is pretty interesting. I think that if this costs 1 less mana, and they honestly could have cost this at 1 less, and like as is, I think it would have been fine. But if they had cost this as like 1 less, this would be really, really good. It's probably why they didn't do it. But I don't think that this engine really has a home. I don't think it's like all that exciting or anything, but it is one of the best ways to filter Omen Hawker and Enigma Jewel into regular mana without really needing to play like a bunch of signets or anything. So I'll be on the lookout for this. This might be something I don't try until they print like another card like Enigma Jewel or anything like that. I did like a deep dive. The best next thing I could find was Blossoming Tortoise, which is like 4 mana 3/3, enters or attacks you, mill 3, put a land from your graveyard to battlefield tapped, and activated abilities cost 1 less. So if you have like multiple turtles in play, this card goes really crazy, and you can like put like Sunken Citadels and buildings into play with it. Probably not going to be the best mana engine in Modern or anything, but it's like it's kind of getting there. You know what I mean? Like this is the start of something potentially powerful. And it only takes like another card like Baxter Building or another card like Enigma Jewel to like really get it off the ground. Red Room Recruit is a 2 mana 1/2 when it enters connives. And you as deck builders need to know this is the most efficient card in Modern to in black, in mono black, to draw a card and then discard a card. It is the most efficient, or like the most effectively costed. There is another 2 mana 0/3 that connives, and that's just a lot worse than a 1/2. And so if you're playing like a Crypt of Agadem deck with Archon of Cruelty, and you just really want another way to get Archon of Cruelty in your yard, and you really need that card to be a creature, this is the card that exists. It's not very good, but it's like, it's important as deck builders, you know what the best thing that exists is to fill like specific roles. And sometimes like the rest of your deck concept is so good and so nice that you're willing to accept an underpowered card like this to have your concept work. And it's possible that like something like this gets upgraded later, but it's just important to know like what is the best mono black draw a card, discard a card effect for Reanimator. This is it. And I'll say that in Modern, they're really stingy on these kind of effects, these draw card, discard cards in mono black, because black is the reanimation color. They don't want to give you the ways to like entomb your creatures. And so I don't expect to play this very often, but it's important that you know that this is somehow the best in slot. Vision Quest is a blue-red X sorcery. You search your library and or graveyard for an artifact creature card. Only creatures, you can't put Lotus Bloom into play with this. With mana value X or less, and you put onto the battlefield with X additional counters on it. And if X is 4 or greater, it gains haste till end of turn. So this card is mostly tutor Walking Ballista and put it into play. If you spend 3 mana on this, you get a 1/1 Walking Ballista, right? And that's behind rate. So like usually it costs you 2 mana to get a 1/1 Walking Ballista. For 4 mana, you get a 2/2 Walking Ballista. That is all of a sudden on rate, although there's not that many like Walking Ballista decks in Modern right now. It is a playable Modern card. And then every mana after 4, you're getting an above rate Ballista, right? So you can 5 mana get a 3/3. And then all of a sudden, if X is 4 and you spend 6 mana on this, you get a hasty Ballista, a hasty 4/4 Ballista, which would usually cost you 8 mana, and it wouldn't have haste. So I think this is interesting. Boy, does it not like go in any decks that I can think of. For the most part, Walking Ballista is like in weird combo decks that are not blue and red, and Walking Ballista is in Hardened Scales, and I'm not going to splash this blue-red card in it. Although Vision Quest could also be interesting with Market-Back Walker and Hangerback Walker because it has very similar dynamics. So I don't know. Maybe I could try to play Team or Hardened Scales. The problem is this card is so mana intensive. It feels like it's more of like a card I'd want to play as a finisher in like a blue-red Tron deck or something like that, which does sound pretty fun. We'll see. More and more in my modern brews become about like casting a big crazy card like this. So I'm more open to this than I would be maybe like a year ago, and we'll see. It could actually get there. We'll see. Doom Reign Supreme reminds me a lot of Karu Monox, the Rat King. Both cards would be awesome if there was like actual support for them. Doom Reign Supreme is a 2-mana plan. Whenever a villain you control enters, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You put a plan counter on this, and when the 5th plan counter is put on this enchantment, you sacrifice it. When you do, target opponent exiles the top 5 cards of your library, and you can play 2 spells from among those for free. So if there were a lot of good cheap villains, or if there was a card that can make a lot of changeling tokens cheaply and efficiently, if there was a card that can make a lot of villain tokens cheaply and efficiently, Doom Reign Supreme would be awesome. I did a deep dive on changelings. It's not there. Although, I mean, I don't know. There's like an awful Magda combo deck I guess you could play this in, and I'm not going to give that thought too much more mind. Like five is a lot. It's a lot of creatures to play. But if there just were a lot of good villains, this card would be awesome. There are not a lot of good villains. And kind of like, it reminds me of Karu Monox, the Rat King, where if there were a lot of good rats, this Karu Monox would be really, really good. And so maybe one day we'll have the enablers. We do not have the enablers at the moment for these payoffs. Photon Living Light. I don't know. There's something about a 5 mana 4/4 flying hexproof prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put a +1 counter on each creature you control. Can also be cast as a 3 mana 3/3 with flying prowess. There's been a lot of things about deck building in Modern over the last 2 years that have made me like take a second look at a card like this. I've cast a lot of Aurora Boroids, I've cast a lot of Legend of Roku, and these cards are really good. The idea of playing a giant prowess hexproof flyer sounds so awesome, and maybe it's just the Timmy in me who sees an effect like this and it is actually giving it a second look. The fact that this is not a 5-drop that's always stuck in your hand and you can play it as a pretty mediocre beater is interesting to me. And I don't know. This is a card that could surprise you, and it could show up like randomly in like a Boros sideboard, and just like it can be like a mediocre curve out tutor target, and can or mediocre curve out like 3-drop, and it can also just be like a giant hexproof creature that your opponent's deck cannot beat. I know, like I know I play a lot of decks that could never beat Photon, so we'll see. I think the card looks sweet. I kind of doubt I'll ever actually play it, but this could be one that you just randomly lose to one day, and then you'll remember this segment in the video. I've seen a lot of people kind of hype on Castle Doom. I think I saw Mingu say that this card is for sure going to see play in Modern Affinity. It taps for colorless. You can spend 1 mana of any color only to cast artifact spells, and you can also spend 3 mana to sack an artifact, and if you do, you make a 3/3 artifact token named Doombot, and you can only activate this as a sorcery. So some pretty clear synergy with weapons manufacturing, your ability to sack a munitions token, deal 2, make a token, 3/3 token. I think that seems pretty good. I like that it can cast artifact spells, although the thing is, it really just says this can cast Kappa Cannoneer and this can cast Pinnacle Emissary. That is good. I'm worried that this card cannot cast Weapons Manufacturing, and I'm worried that this card cannot cast Emery. I'm worried that this card cannot cast Metallic Rebuke. I don't know that the upside of being able to sacrifice munitions tokens or like just any tokens to beat stuff like Collector Oof or Card the Great Creator. Like I don't know that that upside is better than just casting your Emery or your Metallic Rebukes or your Sink into Stupors. I'm kind of thinking that if I was building Affinity, I'd probably just play Fiery Islets and Steam Vents and stuff over this card. But I like a good utility land. I don't want to write it off immediately, but we'll kind of have to see how big this downside of not casting most of the colored spells in your deck is. And we've got these 5 lands too. They're pretty interesting. They all tap for a colorless, and they all tap for one of their other 2 colors, but only if they either entered this turn or if you control a basic land. So in Modern, I think that these are mostly going to be ways for you to be playing a 2-color deck that is splashing Kozilek's Command. I've played a lot of decks that splash Kozilek's Command. Kozilek's Command is the strongest card in Modern. It's so strong that you want to be playing it in non-base Eldrazi decks sometimes, and sometimes these want to be 2-color decks. I'm not 100% sure how good of fixers these lands are, because while yes, they tap for all 3 of your colors, kind of like a Carplusion Forest, or just a regular pain land, but they do so without requiring any pain. That's great. You don't have that much access to basic lands in these decks. Typically, you'll play Prismatic Vista, which is a fetch land that can get any basic land, so it can get you a waste or one of your basic lands. So maybe 4 Vista, 5 other basics, 4 of these, and 4 pain lands, and like 4 Eldrazi temples. Maybe that's just a really good 2-color mana base for these colorless decks. The thing is, you don't really need that much colorless, as much colorless as I'm describing. So we'll see. We'll see if having effectively like 9 basics in your deck is enough to support these. I think it's a little low. We'll see, but not the biggest deal. You could already play these decks, and maybe these make those mana bases a little bit better. I've definitely been dreading the set release. They messed up so bad with the Spider-Man set last time. That set was, the design of the cards was uninteresting. Cards were overly complicated and underpowered, which is quite a bad combo. But the worst thing that set did was have a digital only version of all the cards called Omen Paths, and that was really, really annoying to make content for. This set doesn't have Omen Paths. I'm really excited for that. The design of the cards in the set is all really, really fun. I don't think that there was a single card I talked about where I'm like not that excited to play with it because it doesn't look that fun. I think that things all look like they will improve modern gameplay and will be fun to deck build around. I don't think the overall power level of the set is that high, although the quantity of cards that we have to mess with is high enough for me to be satisfied with. If you're interested in seeing me build some decks with these cards, I'll be live over at twitch.tv/aspiringspike every weekday, playing New Brews for a while, New Brews with Marvel for a while, New Brews with Modern all the time. Thank you for watching to the end. I'll see you over there. Goodbye.